Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our episode for our discussion on movies. I'm your host, Jackie.
I'm Kylan.
Jack.
And I'm Ivan.
Okay, so now, as part two of our discussion on movies, let's dive into a specific case study. So, The Little Mermaid with Holly Bailey and in the titular role of The Little Mermaid, obviously, and Melissa McCarthy as Ursula. And it's a live action adaptation based upon the animated version of the one in 1989, which itself was based on the fairy tale from Hans Christian Andersen in 1837. So, have you guys watched the new Little Mermaid, the old one from Disney, or just know the plot of the story as a whole?
For me, I definitely didn't watch the new one. Probably will at some time in the future. But probably I think me personally, I only remember the plot of the old movie. I don't know how much they changed, how much they deviated from the plot, but I definitely think it's probably worth watching the new remakes of the film while having the old film kind of refresh in your mind.
Yeah, I haven't really watched any movie or like know any of the plot, but I've just heard that it's been like super popular. Actually, a few days ago, one of my friends actually invited me to watch the movie, but I couldn't because I didn't have time. But it obviously if it's like so popular, I think it's like number two on the 2023 movie list. I'm not too sure actually, but like I just heard it was like super popular and it would be great to like watch and know the plot of it soon.
Yeah, I've watched the first one, but yeah, I have not touched the second, The Little Mermaid. I think some of the plot, I just remember like the mermaid's kind of like fascinated with whatever's going on land, and she wants to be a part of that. But yeah, I think it was a pretty good movie, and yeah, I'm excited to watch the second one, I guess.
Yeah, I unfortunately have not had the time to watch the new one yet, but I do plan on watching it. And just like a quick side note, I guess there's like the original like Disney version of like Ariel, so her being a mermaid and then wanting to go on land to find her prince and things like that. But there's also a second movie that was also the animated version, and it was like kind of the follow-up to Ariel. So she had a daughter, Melody, I think her name was, and then Melody was obviously a human, but she wanted to go back into the sea, and it was just like a circle that I thought was really interesting. So if Disney wants to make a remake of that second one, I would also watch that. I think it's really interesting how it's like a circle of like the mom going to land and then the daughter being like, oh no, but the ocean is so cool. And so it's just like that trend continues. Okay, so what do you guys think about this kind of recent trend of all these big production companies making remakes of older popular children's tales? So like The Little Mermaid, as we just talked about, Barbie, which is coming out with Margot Robbie really soon, Beauty and the Beast with Emma Watson a few years ago, Cinderella from a few years ago as well. Why do you think that companies are choosing this route for nostalgia instead of having like a new movie completely with a different plot that we haven't heard of?
I think that from a financial standpoint, it's probably more financially sound to kind of remake the plot. I know that probably there's some aspects they probably have to change because one is animated and one is a live action, which has its own limitations, has its own pros and cons. So there's probably some aspects that are going to be changed from the old plot or movie. Um, but I think it's probably a more financially sound decision, or because you probably have to spend less money, hiring writers. Maybe you don't have to hire as many writers because you're not using a completely new plot. You just need to kind of have a similar plot and similar points of details. So probably that's a one way to kind of keep costs down, but also like I definitely think the nostalgia value is there because um you have like the old Disney anime music came out, like became really popular in like late 1900s, early 2000s, and this is like the generation now, which is adults, and especially with like Gen Z, we did watch basically all of the old Disney movies, even though it didn't come out when we were born. It came out like a decade before we were born, but we still watched all of them because they're just iconic, right? And um Disney knows this. Disney knows that our generation and the generation before us has watched all the Disney movies, has watched all the children's movies for these like Ariel, Little Mermaid, right, and Beauty and the Beast. We all know the plot, and it's not just nostalgic for us. And since we are adults now, we don't need our parents on our, like, we don't have need their permission to go watch movies now. They're like, okay, now is the best time to release a remake. Make sure the nostalgia value is there, and then now people make their own financial decisions. So it's easier now to get higher ticket sales than as if it was released a decade earlier when less people were making their own decisions. And so now you're like, okay, people make their own financial decisions, and then that's why people can buy so many tickets, because you're like, oh my god, I remember when life was fun, and I will probably buy this ticket because nostalgia. I want to go back to the time when life didn't have any much meaning.
I think for me, I think I really find it intriguing, like how like these old action, maybe some animated films, like how they would look with like a lot of like new technology. Like technology has really accelerated over the past decade and in the 2000s in general. And like when some of those movies like were made in like the 1900s, like the quality was like kind of low, but it was still super enjoyable because it was like so popular. So you could definitely see how like the nostalgia can carry over from generation to generation, and how like technology can like change like a lot of aspects of the show. Also, like for just like the planning part of like the movie, I think we could definitely see more like older remakes, because like there's already like a somewhat like set plot that they can use as a guideline, compared to if people wanted to like design a new story, like a script writers, like it would take months to like finish a story. It would even take like 1 or 2 months to like brainstorm, like getting ideas in mind of what people would like in this like new generation. So I think it is a lot easier to do remakes of older popular children tales, and like the nostalgia, the name recognition effect that I mentioned in the last episode. I think those could definitely play a role in like the popularity of like newer remakes, and it just seems more like reasonable to do a remake than to design a completely new story from scratch.
I think it's just like the amount of work that needs to be put in for movies that you're remaking. You kind of already have the plot, you have the characters, and you have basically what you need to kind of start filming already. But in terms of like completely making a new movie, I know that process is like very long. It's just the amount of like it's all comes down to like the value of watching the movie, how many people are going to watch it, and you don't know that making a brand new movie is going to get you more viewers than creating like a remake of an older children's movie. And if the work you have to put in is like considerably less in terms of creating a remake, then that's what these like movie producers and directors are looking for in terms of just trying to get the most value out of what they're making.
I think that's a good point. And also, I think there is that fact of established popularity. Like all the old Disney films, they are very popular. Like these big production companies, they're not like looking at some box office flop from 20 years ago. They're looking at the movies that like are established in our culture. So like Beauty and the Beast, Ariel, Cinderella, like we all know those stories. And they're all very established in like pop culture. So they're not just choosing some random one that failed a long time ago, but one that actually has maybe not a fan base per se, but like everyone knows of them. Everyone likes them essentially. And also I think that's also why there's a lot of things happening with like you look at a book that was really popular and then you kind of turn it into a screenplay and you adapt it for obviously the movies or a TV show. And I think it's always like been happening, even though like this recent trend for like um children's fairy tales or just like children's stories has been coming up, but that trend of like having remakes of older things has always been around. Like Purple Noon was like a movie from the 1960s, I want to say, and there was like a lot of remakes of it, and there was just kind of like The Talented Mr. Ripley was also in 1990s, so they kind of had like just like these trends of remaking something, but like the recent trend is making children's tales. Even though before there was a lot of like remaking a book, remaking or like adapting something else. So I think that trend has always been around. We just are noticing a lot more with children's stories now. Okay, and now hopping back into The Little Mermaid, and it was officially released to theaters on Friday, well, this past Friday, May 26th. And according to the deadline, this film will rack in about $125 million for its 4-day opening for 4,320 theaters during the Memorial Day weekend. And then this will be the 4th highest Memorial Day weekend opening in history. Only Top Gun, Pirates of the Caribbean, Indiana Jones will obviously beat this. So that's a very successful film in terms of the box office, and especially when we talked about how like after COVID-19, the box office and like how much films make at the theater has been decreasing. Obviously, like they still make a lot of money through streaming, but for like movie theaters, they have been decreasing. We talked about this in our previous episode, so if you haven't watched that, go back and watch that. But obviously, this is a very successful film. But do we think as a whole that remakes or live action adaptations of existing films are as successful as this one, or is this kind of like an outlier that was just super popular compared to its peers and remakes?
I definitely think the remakes or live adaptations are definitely going to be probably on the same level as successful. Um, I think the Little Mermaid is kind of an outlier, not in terms of like box office sales, but like in terms of its quote unquote popularity, because um, there's a lot of people who hate the movie, but also a lot of people who love the movie. And like it's generally split 50-50 right now. Um, but I also find it interesting that other live adaptation remakes like Beauty of the Beast, and then I forgot the name again, but like the guy, the kid who like lives in the jungle and it's like raised by like lions and stuff. What was it? The Jungle
Frozen?
Book?
Oh, never mind.
Jungle Book. Yeah. But I remember those two being also really popular when they came out, and like I generally think that Disney is actually making these decisions because they know it will be popular, right? Like they don't have to do as much marketing. You just need to throw a name out there, like, "Hey, remember this movie you watched as a kid? Now we're remaking it," and then that's it. They don't have to do anything else to market the live adaptation. So that's why I think, because of like live adaptation nostalgia factor or whatever, these remakes are going to be probably on par with what Little Mermaid is doing currently, being especially popular. Everybody's probably going to watch it at a certain time or place. Um, but I also find it interesting, like Top Gun, Maverick, Pirates of the Caribbean, Indiana Jones. These are movies that are kind of building upon a series, right? Top Gun, you had the old Top Gun movie from the 1980s. Pirates of the Caribbean, that's like its own thing, and Indiana Jones, that's also its own thing. Like that's, I think it's going off what the Little Mermaid's also doing, right? They're building off an older movie, and maybe in a different sense, like these are series which are building off, like adding a new part to it. But Little Mermaid's doing something different, which is kind of remaking it with newer technology. It's not animated. There's good and really popular actors, and I'm assuming the CGI and animation is gonna be good in the movie because it has to be, right? And so that's why I think these live adaptations are going to be so popular. Even though maybe Little Mermaid might be a little bit more popular based on like, money wise.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I kind of do think that Little Mermaid is an outlier for at least like the moment, like right now, for like a few months or just like 1 or 2 years, because like as we could see with all the other movies that Jackie mentioned, like we had like Top Gun Maverick, Pirates of the Caribbean, they were either like continuations of like show like or like movies that were like are within like a few years apart, or they're just like something completely new. But like this new movie, it's like a remake from something that was like 40, 30, 40, 50, even 60 years ago. That was like a long time ago. So definitely we can see like there's like a desire for it to like come back in new production with like new technology. We can really see how technology can like impact like a a newer remake of like an older movie, see what the influence is, and I find that really interesting. But also, I think in the like in the long run, we could definitely see like more movies like Little Mermaid. We can definitely see like movies like that, remakes, like getting more like popular and like overtaking this potential like number. So I feel like this movie could like start like a trend like in the future. Although it's an outlier now, I think it's like a milestone for like the remake like type of movies that, and then we'll probably see like more popular remakes of like more potentially more famous movies like in the future within like 10 years of time.
Yeah, I agree with Jack. As of like, yeah, right now it's definitely kind of standing out as like, not a lot of remakes in the past, even with Disney movies, have achieved this type of success. Like as Jackie said, it's like the fourth highest grossing remake of all time. And I know like there's a lot of famous remakes that like I've watched before, like Mulan or like Peter Pan. Like those are good, but like yeah, they just never received like the commercial success that The Little Mermaid has. And yeah, like Jack said as well, it's just like it definitely makes you think about like what different produce like movie directors are gonna do in the future in terms of trying to make more remakes because of the success that The Little Mermaid has. I just feel like it can definitely set a trend for the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that everyone said. And then to kind of also look again at The Little Mermaid, I think it's also important to acknowledge that there was a lot of controversy and just it was a pretty controversial casting choice for a little bit, especially with the lead actress being black and The Little Mermaid Ariel in Disney's 1989 version, she was white with like red hair. And so there were a lot of people saying, well, you can't just like change the race. And obviously people have different opinions, but the casting choice was very controversial and it was a lot of uproar like on the news, on social media, just a lot of people on different sides of this topic. And with this specific movie, do you think that the box office and like its commercial success, because it very undeniably is very successful in terms of how much it's been making, even this Memorial Day weekend, it's predicted to rack up $125 million in just 4 days. So that's kind of a lot of money that it's been able to make. So do you think like this kind of just as a whole, this whole case study, do you think the box office is reflective of its popularity and how people love it? Like, do they like it? Do they go to the movies to watch it because they're like, oh my God, Ariel, we love it? Or do they go to watch because it was pretty controversial and that generated a lot of like curiosity for it?
Yeah, so in my opinion, the controversy surrounding the new remake of The Little Mermaid, I think there's a term for this. I think it's called noise marketing, where companies who they know that their decisions are controversial, and that's why they go with it because typical marketing like ads or not have a limited degree of effectiveness. But when you add controversy to the mix, then the marketing steps up to another level because people are doing the marketing for you now and you don't have to do anything. You stay silent. And now people are fighting over whatever your decision was good or not. And then that just helps you generate more popularity. Popular, quote unquote, it might be, most probably would be negative because literally people are fighting each other for it. Um, and like this marketing I think is pretty risky because when you have using noise marketing, like you are risking kind of your movie coming off as um inconsiderate or bad in general. And but for this one, I think the remake is actually like pretty smart with using noise marketing because they know that a lot of people will support the decision of casting a black actor for a typical white character. um and they probably knew that there's going to be controversy surrounding this, and that's probably another reason why they stuck with the decision because they know like how this noise marketing would generate even more box office sales than if they didn't, if they went with the typical, with the like typical character of Ariel with casting like a white actor or maybe even dyeing the white actor's hair red. um like that's probably the decision where like, okay, nobody's gonna fight over because that's literally what Ariel looks like, right? But casting a black actor is going to cause controversy, and I think that's one of the reasons why the box office sales are that high, and that's why I don't think the box office is probably not reflective of the movie's belovedness, but definitely reflective of the movie's popularity, because more people watch it not because they are, they love the movie, they love the concept. It's more because they're like, does this work out? I'm curious as to say, um, if it works. If it's really bad, I already bought a ticket, so I know. So like, it doesn't really show that how much people love it, but it definitely shows like how good the marketing was.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like that, I definitely think that this film has been really like they have been like really careful and stingy with how they've been like using like noise marketing. They've obviously attracted like a lot of like people to listen to it because not just because they like it, because they're curious about like what the controversy is and potentially have their like say on it. And like box office definitely can represent like changes in that, but definitely like belovedness. I don't think that box office is like really effective. Like I think that other measures like I guess like fan reviews and like Rotten Tomatoes, I think they're like more effective because that's really where the space where fans can speak out about what they think of a movie. And I think that like using those as like I think like fan reviews, like some people are gonna like really love it. Others are like gonna be like against it because of like the controversy. And then we can use like fan reviews to like really like judge like how much like people really like love this movie rather than sorry rather than box office numbers.
Yeah, I don't think the box office is going to tell the full story in terms of a movie's popularity. Like you said, like with Hal Bailey being black and Disney's 1989 version of Ariel being white, there might be like more to them trying to do that and people wanting to see the movie with the controversy rather than in terms of how beloved a movie is. So yeah, I just think the box office isn't really going to tell the full story. But yeah, it just in terms of a movie's full popularity, like Jack said, it's a lot to do with the people watching it and not just inside just a box office like number.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like all this controversy has definitely helped its commercial success and its popularity. Um, because there is like naturally curiosity to see like if something that was pretty controversial, like there was a lot of uproar on social media about like people defending the choice, people going against the choice. So there was a lot about that, and I think that kind of controversy definitely helped its popularity. And on either side. Okay, and then last question for our discussion on movies and like live action remakes. So the budgets for these live action adaptations are actually quite high. Like you would intuitively assume that because you don't have to have a whole new script, you can like get away with a slightly lower budget, but that's actually not true because a lot of the recent ones, so for example, The Little Mermaid was around $200 million in budget. Aladdin was 183 million, Beauty and the Beast for 160, and The Lion King reportedly was $260 million. And so that's a pretty high budget, especially comparing to some other movies you can make that's like completely new, fresh, that you don't need $260 million to make the movie as your budget. So because this is like a really high budget, and this is considering that you don't even need to make a whole new script, you just adapt it a little bit. Like obviously that costs money, but it doesn't cost as much as having a whole new production team coming in, having a writing team write your script, obviously. So having that high of a budget, if you were the director, if you were like the producer, do you think it's a good idea to make a remake or to think of a new movie? Because like if you have that high of a budget, that also means that you need more money to make as like your revenue in order to make a profit, right? Like your movie might make a lot of money and just like, for example, $125 million is how much you make, but you also spent $200 million as part of your budget. So do you think, as like if this were your choice, would you go with a new movie or would you stick with a remake of something old?
I mean, going to the director's point of view, like these movies like Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, these are big nostalgic factors. and the marketing is pretty much guaranteed, right? It's guaranteed to have a good performing box office sales number. And personally, I think why the budgets are so high is because first you need to hire popular actors, right? If they don't hire well-known actors, then you'll be like, people watching the movie will be like, hey, who's this? Why is that unknown actor playing the main role, right? Um, and so they definitely need to get new good actors and popular actors at it. So that's probably one of the reasons why the budget is so high. But other reasons, like, I think um the Lion King was mostly CGI, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Lion King I think was mostly CGI, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's the higher budget of all these remakes. Um and I think the reason the remakes is kind of like a contrast, right? Before you had the animated version with the 1980s technology equipment, movie producing equipment, but now in today's day and age, the production quality has increased like so many times. Like you have CGI that looks real. Like sometimes you don't even know what's CGI, what's real anymore. And additionally have like better props, better recording technology, better production, even just more experienced directors, more experienced actors. And I think the reason why Disney is making this is kind of like a remake, right? To show how much these old plots have a potential, and using the real now extremely high tech movie production technology, um, it's definitely a good choice to make a remake instead of a new movie, because you already have the guaranteed sales from the nostalgic factors. But now you're kind of like testing out new equipment, testing out, if we're using this plot, how popular, how good can we make a movie using all these new technologies, and like compare it to the old movie, like you can definitely see the difference. Like maybe there's one now that we remade it using better technology. Maybe there's a favorite now. Maybe the old movie is just nostalgia, but the new movie showcases how much the movie production industry has grown in the last 3 decades. So I think it's probably a good reason why they're choosing to make a remake instead of a completely new movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think personally, like if I was like a movie director, I'd personally do like an, a remake. Well, I don't know what the cost of like making like completely new movies are, but there's like another cost of like hiring new like hiring writers and script writers. But also for those movies, there's more of a risk that this a movie like could bust, and which means like a lot of money could like be lost. Of course, there's always a chance that the movie could like explode and do really well. But like for like these established like plots, a remake, like there's already some magnitude of success that's like kind of like guaranteed based on like the legacy of like of the original. And the I think the original, like the success, like I think the reason why there's such a high budget is like they want to like make the highest quality like remake because they just want to like carry on like the legacy. Like if like the budget was low and like the remake output turned out to be like not so great, like people will be like, oh, why is this like remake so underwhelming and stuff. So like I think just I think that like the remake's job is to like continue the legacy of that movie, like so on and so forth. And to do that, they have to hire the highest quality directors, highest quality, and probably most famous actors that could be like attracting a lot of people based on name recognition, but also like the highest like technology because they just want to have like the highest output like possible, and they want to like use technology to the fullest and like create like I guess like different like props and like different stuff that like I don't know, like maybe in like the past, like cost less but lower quality. So I think that I think there's like a certain pressure that comes with like making a remake that like kind of like requires a higher budget so they can like successfully continue like the legacy of the old movie that was so popular early on.
Yeah, I think that in terms of a remake, I do think it would probably be a bit smarter than thinking of a new movie, but that's only if the original movie is something like iconic, of course, and you already have that baseline that you want to go off of, and nothing has been made similarly to that before. If you have that available for you, then that's probably going to be easier for you to make like a high quality movie than completely starting from scratch and thinking of a new movie. I think that making a new movie could potentially like be bringing, like, if you make like it potentially has a higher potential for more money than a remake does, just if like the remake is disappointing or like people don't like what they see from in comparison to the original. But yeah, overall I do think that if you have the opportunity and like you have the original movie, which is like very iconic, you can make a remake, then it's going to be a bit easier for you to achieve success than with completely starting from scratch.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely agree with that, like, because you already have this established popularity for your movies, so you don't need to like have as much marketing. Like, obviously you do need marketing because it's a new movie, you want people to know you're making it, you want to get them excited for it, but you don't really need to have as much effort in being like, okay, guys, this is a new story we're coming out with, because people already know what the Little Mermaid's about. They already know what Beauty and the Beast is about. So that brings me to takeaways. And I think one thing that was touched upon, but I thought was actually really interesting, was kind of this differentiation of like series and remakes. Like for series, for example, and like franchises, you have Pirates in the Caribbean, Indiana Jones, Top Gun, like those are all part of a series. Like that was, they're not a remake of the first one, but they were like just number 4, number 5, number 6 going on in this series. And I think like those are interesting because that's kind of like the mix between a remake and having a whole new original idea, because it is a new idea in the sense that you're not just repeating the plot of the first one, but it is like the same character. It is usually still the same universe of characters happening in it. And so it's like a continuation, and you get like that old factor of like people already know what's happening, assuming that your first one was popular enough. People already know like who the characters are, or like the general specifics of this universe. But it's still like new, and people are still excited to watch something that they haven't already watched.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, especially with I might deviate from the conversation a little bit, but like Top Gun, like you had the old movie and you had the new movie, and one of the biggest takeaways from that movie was like, oh crap, like technology has increased so much that I actually feel like they recorded this, like it's so high quality you can't even tell what is CGI, what is real. I mean, most of the film is real, but there's definitely some parts that are CGI, but you can't tell which one is real, which one is CGI. And the one of the biggest takeaways from these live action means like, holy crap, technology is amazing, right? Before, like you, when you're a child, when you watch these Disney like fairy tales, like you're like, oh wow, it's so beautiful. And then when you watch these remakes, you're like, oh my god, what else I think he was a child? Like this is the production quality is so much better in these real remakes, and like technology has increased so much. Like I think that's like one of the bigger takeaways, instead of like, oh, the actors really well, but I think more people are focused on like, live action, there's actors, there's CGI, there's so much, there's like information overload going on. And I think that's one of the factors why these live action remakes are so popular. And adding on to that, like you have the Barbie movie that's gonna come. I don't know if it came out already, but um the album that's going on with it is also like, there's a lot of hype going on because you have like mainstream artists like uh Ice Spice, Pink Panthers, and then you also have like relative unknown artists like 50/50. I think that's one of the reasons why these remakes are gaining so much traction, because there's hype not only about the movie, but about the soundtrack, but about the actors. So there's so many more things going on for them that it's just like a secure investment. Like Disney knows this will pop off. They know it will be popular. So that's why they're willing to spend so much more money on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of my takeaways is that like even though right now like Little Mermaid may be like an outlier in like the amount of like box office deals, obviously it was like highly successful. But then like since a lot of people are like doing like remakes, we've already seen remakes of like Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast. and then there's like a ton of other remakes that are like really like lined up, it could like set a trend for the future that like, oh, this was like the beginning of like something completely new, like remakes in within like new technologies. Like there's like another like big type of like movie that's like rising, and I feel like this the success of like Little Mermaid right now could have like the potential to set like a trend for within the next 10 or 20 years. And we could definitely see more remakes getting up on that list within like the rankings of like higher box office skills on like within like a, just a few days from like its like first ever launch.
Yeah, I think that um yeah, I agree with what everybody said. Just to add on a little bit, I guess in terms of yeah, I think everybody just said what I was gonna say, but yeah, just movies in terms of having a higher budget. Um, I prefer remakes in comparison to the new movie.
Yeah, those are all very interesting takes. So thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's episode of Teens for Business, and we'll hope you tune into our next one. Thank you.